Valdez, who's at Mount St. Vincent, is the Dean of Undergraduate College. And he's going to do a brief presentation and give a chance for questions and answers. He'll also be again doing that at 5:30 this evening at the Enos Administration Building for the Taos Municipal School. So if you want to go back again, students will have us, and staff will have a section alone, a session. What time is that? That's
students are 2:30 to 3.
Students are 2:30 to 3, and staff follows that from 3 to 3:30. And that's back in that room, Deb, that we were here in the large conference room. Faculty just had a session alone, so there'll be sessions at least for half an hour where everybody can individually, so you'll have 2 or 3 different chances and opportunities to meet each candidate. Today is Dr. Patrick Valdez.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out to listen to me talk a little bit about, I guess the presentation is who am I, who I am, and why UNM-Taos, and why that was what they set me up with. Before I get to that, though, I'd like to ask, are there any students here? Raise your hand if you're a student. 2 students, all right, and then 3, that's right. And let's see, faculty?
Well, actually, I'm one of everything.
I'll get to all the above. And who are staff? I'm assuming everybody else is staff. So I just want to make sure, there's a portion of what I talk to, I like to talk to students about, so I want to find out who they were so I can address them. And the rest of it's just kind of for everybody. So I'm not sure how many times you've ever had to think about who you were. So I had to approach this without going through some sort of existential crisis, like this question of, who am I? Who am I? So I sit there for a second, like, man, who am I? Really? Who am I? And so I figured the best way to do is to tell you where I come from, first and foremost, right? So, because sometimes I think if you see my CV, you say, well, this guy's been in New York, D.C., and now he's interested in coming out to UNM-Taos. So what gives, right? So I'm from a small town in Texas. You might can tell from some words that I speak, come out with a little drawl, but not all. Called Placido, Texas. You can Google it right now and it won't be a thing. It's about 13 miles off the coast, just north of Corpus Christi and about 2 hours south of Houston. I grew up on a ranch out in a small town. My grandfather was a proprietor of land, which basically means as long as you work the land, you get to live on it. It's probably one rung up from a tenant farmer, so as you recall, that's not too good. Nonetheless, a lot of running around cornfields when I was growing up, so that was a lot of fun. And so I grew up in a small town, not unlike Taos. In fact, smaller than Taos. I did a PowerPoint before I knew that I was not going to do a PowerPoint. And I put these pictures of cornfields and like country roads and saying, look, see, I know what you're going through when you live in Taos. This is where I come from. So that's where I started. So from there, I went to a little bit bigger city called Victoria, Texas, which is about 13 miles from where I grew up, and there's about 75,000 people. And when I told my friends I was leaving, they thought, man, you're going to a big city now. And for the rest of my high school career, every time I went back home to where I grew up, they were always thinking, like, tell us about the big city. I said, it's dangerous out there, man. You got to be careful. And so I went to the Air Force. And I tell you that story right out of high school because of the fact that even though I've been at 4-year institutions, I'm a non-traditional student. And I started my career at a community college in the Air Force. I got out of the Air Force, I went to a small private Catholic called St. Edward's University first semester. Then they told me I had to pay tuition, and I was like, oh, really? Okay. So they said, you can't come back until you pay your bill. So I spent the next 3 semesters at a community college in Austin, called Austin Community College. So a quarter of my undergraduate degree is, in fact, from a community college. And all of my career education has been non-traditional. And I understand that a large population of the students that we serve here at UNM-Taos are, in fact, non-traditional. Those who have been working for quite a while and decided they want to come back and get a certificate or an associate's degree, or maybe they've decided, hey, I want to work towards a 4-year degree, and this is where I'm going to start. And that's a unique population because they come with a different set of challenges and obstacles that a traditional student would face. Nonetheless, I've been at a 4-year institution and mostly we focused on traditional students, which would be your first-time full-time freshman. And I've done that just about every job I've ever had has been focused on a first-time full-time freshman. But again, not unlike what you have here at UNM-Taos. Every institution I've been at has been a Hispanic-serving institution, which is what you are here. Every institution I've been at has had about a 40 to well, I'd say maybe a 40 to 50% Hispanic student population. I believe we're at 60% here. And all of them have been first generation, mostly Pell eligible, underrepresented. All the categories that I myself checked off when I was a student. So I'm very familiar with the challenges that the students face that come to your institution. That being said, I'm also familiar with the challenges that faculty and staff face by trying to serve the student population. So you do spiritual work here, right? When you do this kind of stuff, because if you don't care, then there's no way you can keep doing it. So these types of institutions are important. So that's kind of an overview of who I am in terms of where I'm from. Now I thought I'd break it down into as an educator. So as an educator, I've been in different types of institutions, and I've always been committed to access. How do we help students gain access to an education, whether it be a certificate or degree or a four-year institution? That's been my main focus. As an administrator, I've held the position of dean, assistant dean, and I've always worked closely with staff and faculty to make sure that we attain the goal that we're trying to accomplish, which has been how we make sure that students are learning and that they are actually graduating and moving on. So those are the roles that I've served as an educator. Now, as a student, I shared a little bit about the type of student I was. And this may sound overly cliche, but I believe it. I think we're always all students. You know, if you're reading the book, you're learning. You know, if you're interacting with people, you're learning. In that regard, if you've ever been to New York City, you know that you're a student every single minute of the day because you get on the subway train, you're around people. You walk out your door, you're around people. So these are things that I've been accustomed to. And there's a real beauty in that. And I'm thankful for those experiences that I've had. Now, why? As a researcher, let me add this. As a researcher and as a scholar, I have focused my research on the designation of a Hispanic serving institution, policy formation of that institution. How did this come about? So I worked at HACU, which is the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, and the question that always come up is, why 25%? Why is 25%? Now, I'm not going to get too much into that because that in itself could be its own presentation that I've done at different places. But the question around why 25%? So I was curious as everybody else was. So when I went back to do my PhD, I started researching that background. And I got to meet people who had advocated, really were advocating not for the 25% designation, but they were just advocating for monies to be given to institutions that were serving a large number of Latino students. And so I've been able to elucidate that policy formation history and written about it. So if you have my CV, I encourage you to, if you're interested, to look up some of the publications that I've had around that area. It's really quite fascinating, not because I wrote it. It's fascinating because the people who lived it and did it, their story is pretty amazing. So I would encourage you to do that, if anything, just to pay homage and give gratitude for the work that they did. And I say that wholeheartedly because you guys, again, for the population that we serve here at UNM-Taos, but also because of the fact that you have a Title V grant, which is a direct result of that designation. So that money is helping you serve students better, and it's a result of the work that was started a long time ago. So that gives me a lot of, I've always had a lot of respect for elders, but looking at that history even more so in that regard. So I think that the histories are important. So that's me kind of as a student, as an educator, administrator, as a researcher. Now, White House. So I've said this, and let me just say a small caveat. For those of y'all who have heard me talk already this morning, you're going to hear things that I already said. I've been asked these questions about, several times. So I apologize. But yesterday I was driving to the canyon, and it's the first time I've been to that canyon, by the way. I saw rocks, fences, like to protect rocks from falling. It's like, where the hell am I going?
We all feel that way.
Where is this place? He said it's the high desert. I said, I didn't know there was rocks in the high desert. I thought just cactus. So driving through the canyon. I've never been here. It's the first time I've been out here. And so, but I looked at images, right? I've gone online, I looked at pictures, and I think at one point I even you can Google map yourself right to a road and like advance yourself, like you're here. I'm like, wow, looks like a lot like the place where I grew up. And then I see the mountain, I'm like, no, not so much. So anyway, I come around this right turn of this, coming out of this canyon. And you guys, you've done it before, so you know what I'm talking about, right? That last right? And I think this is going to be, what's it called?
The horseshoe.
Yeah, that one, the horseshoe. I was like, this is going to be beautiful. And it was knockout. I mean, I was amazed. I was like, wow, the gorge, the flash, and then this mountain. And I'm thinking, wow, this is like a picturesque, right out of the movie. So I had a good feel. I was like, wow, okay, sounds pretty good, looks pretty good. And then I drove into town, and again, not unlike towns that I grew up in and towns back home, which are small. But particularly Taos because not necessarily, I mean, I was familiar with UNM, I've been familiar with the UNM system. I have a lot of colleagues at UNM down in Albuquerque that I worked with over the years. So it's not like New Mexico was foreign to me. And I always figured, you know, if there was an opportunity to come back west, either back to Texas or close to Texas, I would be interested. Then I got this flyer on UNM-Taos, and I thought, wow, UNM-Taos, it's a community college within a four-year system. And how does my skill set tie to that? I said, well, I've been at a four-year system most of my life, but I've always been at small schools. And the one I'm at now has about 1,400 students. You guys have here, I think, 1,600, something like that. So I'm like, about the same size. What's the difference? Private. We're two-year. So how do you make that change? Well, over the last several years, and this has happened quite rapidly because the cost of education has increased, as many of you are aware. Either because you're paying for it if you're a student, although you get a great deal here, but in other places it's going up really fast. I started to develop a real crisis of conscience around students that are at my private institution who, for whatever reason, don't persist and are leaving my institution either because they're suspended academically or because financially they decided that fourth semester they can't pay for it. They leave there without a transcript. They're not going to get that transcript unless they pay what they owe us. And remember my experience when I studied, when I had to leave St. Edward because I couldn't afford to pay. I was fortunate to work my way back. But those students, a lot of my students, I don't think they will. And so here you spend a year and a half getting in debt, and you got no transcript to show for it. And that started to become a real issue for me. And so when I got this flyer, community college, associate's degree, certificate programs, we talk about, when in education and pedagogy, we talk about meeting students where they're at, and bringing them, well, what better way to meet students in the community where they're at than to offer programs that don't just lead to four-year degrees, but that lead to certificates and to associate's degrees if that's what the students are interested in getting. And the one that serves the community. As you probably tell, I like to talk, I think I'm affable, so I like being out with people. That's where I thrive. You know, on my campus, I'm talking to students all the time, I'm talking to faculty, I'm talking to staff. I just love doing that kind of stuff. I get it from my mom. My mother could be in a grocery line. By the time she got to the cashier, she'd be everybody behind her, in front of her, beside her. Then I talk to everybody. So I get that from mom. I guess to give her credit. And so this is why UNM-Taos became particularly of interest to me. Because I felt like my skill set, I'm kind of a hybrid. I don't have this linear path to where I've been. I've kind of moved, and I've had to adjust in life. Circumstances have demanded certain things of me. And that's not my phrase, that comes from one of my favorite historians by the name of John Hope Franklin, who wrote mostly about slavery and African Americans after Reconstruction. So he'd always say, people always come up to me and say, they want to apologize to me about slavery. And he says, don't apologize about slavery, just apologize about 150 years after slavery. And Jim Crow and all these things, right? So in his autobiography, he writes about having to always work really, really hard because he was a young black man in the 20s and 30s trying to get an education. He talks about the devotion that he had and how he just never felt like he caught a break because he was always working. And he says, but I had to do it because it's what circumstances demanded. And I always think about that phrase, like circumstances demand certain things. So my career has not been linear because circumstances demanded some shifts here and there. But I've always been upward, and I promise you that the places that I've left were better than when I got there. And I feel like that's the real measure of success. A lot of times when we get to where we're going, people think, well, I'm here, so I've been successful because I got that position. I think that's false. I think the success is when you leave and you go, this is the really good stuff that we did while I was there. And that's how I operate. And I think that keeps you motivated every day to do that. So those are the reasons why I'm interested in Taos and why I think I'm a really good fit for you guys. My career has been nimble, like this college is nimble. I've got faculty. I'm sure we have faculty here. I know we have faculty here that love what they do and are great at what they do, and say, I don't always want to be speaking to the community. I mean, I'll do it, because we want to engage. But for the most part, I want to be into my discipline. That's what my discipline is. So you want somebody that's going to get out there in front and say, hey, well, I'll talk to the community on your behalf. That's what I want to do. I'll go out to Santa Fe and work at the legislature because that's kind of what I want to do. Right? I want to stay busy and I want to be involved and engaged and I want to make a difference. And so I want to do that for faculty. Same thing holds for staff. Staff, you work really hard at what you do. And sometimes when we think about where the growth occurs, obviously we know that occurs in the classrooms. But how do we get better on the staff end? And I've been on that end. I've been on the student affairs side. That's where I started my career, but I've also been on the academic affairs side. Almost every position that will report to me as CEO here, I've been in. I've actually done. And I guess that's what you get in 20 years of experience. So I understand those things. But at the same time, I'm going to ask questions that may challenge you. Now you say, oh, don't say that too much, right? Because you're trying to get the job. We don't want somebody that challenges us. No, I'm the opposite. We challenge our students, or we should challenge ourselves. But it'll be rewarding, is what I said earlier. I'm going to ask questions, and I'm very inquisitive. But when we get to where we need to get, we're going to feel good about it. And if we don't get where we wanted, we're still going to know that we did everything that we could to get there the best way that we could. So staff, faculty, you're looking for somebody that's going to champion you, somebody that's going to represent you to the community, also represent you to UNM down in Albuquerque, which the relationship exists. I'm not intimidated by any of that. In fact, I'm excited by that opportunity. That's kind of where I'm at in my career, kind of where I want to kind of hang my hat for a while in terms of next steps. So that's a little bit about me. I think there's a little bit more, but at this point I'll ask if you have any questions, because I've found the same way in the classroom, more learning gets done when you ask questions of me, because there may be things that I'm not even thinking about that you're interested in. So at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And we're on camera too, so. Take on my right side, right? My good side. Any questions about anything? Don't feel shy. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Valdez, I've had a little experience with this hiring. When we have a candidate come in, not at the university, but at one of the places I work, and they were very happy to come in, and they really wanted to come in. How does your family feel about leaving New York and coming to Taos?
Well, so my daughter's already grown up. They're on their own. They graduated from college, so they don't care where that goes. They're living their own life. You know what I mean? So it'd be my wife, right? Would be considered. The thing is, we want to get back out west. Families in Texas, parents are getting older. They still have a lot of vitality, but they're getting older. Like I said, at the beginning, New York's a grind. I think that you can do it for, well, some people do it. Some people, it's like Taos. Some people show up in New York and they stay in this thing for 25 years. I can't do it. It's just too much of a grind. So it'll be a challenge though. And I asked, that question was asked of me when I first was interviewed. They said, hey, what do you think one of the biggest challenges is going to be? I said, moving from New York to Dallas is going to be a challenge. Like, there's buildings and people everywhere, and here there's people and some buildings. Somebody asked me earlier, how are you going to clean the town with one theater? I'm like, okay. I do a lot of online TV, Netflix. No, I think the opportunity is welcome. I'm excited about it. I'm ready for change. There's a part of, I think, you get into your life and your career where you did some things. I'll leave New York with a cracked rearview mirror. I said that earlier. I've done a lot there. And the city's not going anywhere. And I think in some ways I'm going to enjoy it more when I can fly back and spend 4 or 5 days and know that I'm leaving. There's points in your life, where you've done something and you just kind of have like, you know what, I'm okay. I did it. And a year in, I would have been like, nah, I'm not ready to go yet. I really want to be here. Hell, 8 months ago, I might have been, still that way, But that's changed in the last few months, just because, again, the job, the crisis of conscience with the tuition that students are paying, but also just starting to really feel the impacts of. It takes me an hour and a half to get to work. For those of y'all that didn't hear me earlier, I take the R train to the 2 train to the 1 train to the shuttle. And it sounds really cool if you don't do it. If you've never done it, you're like, oh, that's cool. R, 2, 1. That sounds kind of cool when I say it right now. But then I think about actually being on those trains, and then it's cold, you gotta walk to the subway, you gotta wear a lot of stuff, and then it's hot on the train. There's smells on the train. So anyway, it's welcome. Thank you for asking.
Hi, Dr. Valdez. My name is Avelina Martinez, and I am the program manager for TRIO Student Support Services here. And I saw that in your background, you were the director of college access and success initiatives at your previous college. And I was just wondering, how familiar are you with TRIO federal programs and specifically student support services?
So that I think they actually may have updated that. My last, I was director, that was at APLU, but right now, actually the TRIO director reports to me.
Awesome.
So TRIO is right under I meet with that director all the time. In fact, she just do an annual like in October, November. Yeah. So we did real well on our scores. I started off in admissions recruiting for the camp program. You guys have a camp program here, so I know how to recruit for migrant students. Also HEP. From there I went, because I know some of you may not have had access to my CV. From there I went in, I was an assistant director of student life. So I worked in the student life area, then I went to housing, and I worked in the housing area. So all those are student services focused. I was assistant dean for student professional development in the College of Business at UTSA, which is 6,000 students alone in the College of Business just by itself, which has been bigger than most institutions that I've worked at. So I'm very familiar with student services, and that's why I was mentioning earlier about the work that student services do. But I think that where we have to remind ourselves with student services, it's easier on the academic side of the house because we're used to course evaluations, we're used to doing learning outcomes, assessments, reviewing our curriculum. Sometimes on the student affairs side, we're not used to that same assessment. So when assessments started coming around for us, it started becoming a real big issue. Like, okay, what do we measure and how do we measure it? And a lot of times what I tell my directors is, what do we say we're going to do in the grant? Because I don't know what happens between submitting, writing really good grants and submitting them and getting them awarded in actual practice. But when it's time to do your annual report, you're like, I'm supposed to answer these questions. Like, I don't even know that we were measuring that. It sounded good when we wrote it. So what I do is I take all of the things that we say we're going to do in these really great grants that we write that are awarded, give them to my directors, and I say, these are the things that we have to answer when we do the annual report. If we're not tracking them, let's figure out a way to track them because we need to track them. Because I don't want to get to January, it's due in February, and we're scrambling because we didn't do this. And that's happened, and that's experience, and that's happened, and that's not a good feeling. But it can be prevented. So we have to be better on the assessment side when it comes to student services. And not better because we don't do it, it's better to be aware of it. But I wholeheartedly believe in student services. I mean, that's where I cut my teeth. And I think that there's an opportunity for a lot of collaboration.
Great, thank you. And then I have a follow-up question. Well, not really, just another question. But you mentioned your work in HSI, and I was wondering, what do you believe are some strategies that could be implemented at UNM-Taos to talk more positively or even to market that we are an HSI designation? I think there's just hesitation often in universities and colleges to say we're HSI, because I think there can be misconceptions. So I think it's a really positive thing that we have, and I think if our community could understand that more. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are.
Well, I appreciate that question, and even the way that you asked it kind of alerts me to that there may be a certain temperature on campus or in the room around that. And it's a question that I've been around all my life. The first thing I want to do is kind of get a better idea from people, like what is that sense? Because I've heard a couple things and a couple different questions, but I'm not real sure. Thank you so much. I was at one college one time where flat out they said this is a hot button issue. Like this is a hot button issue. And it wasn't a hot button issue because the institution itself didn't know that they were an HSI, it was because of the different groups on campus. If you say you're this, then does that mean you're not that? So it's kind of like a zero-sum game. Like if you're an HSI, then does that mean you're not for anybody else that's on our campus? So I think that you have to be very careful about when you approach this HSI designation and this talk to make sure that it's not a zero-sum game here. This is not about focusing on one group of students at the risk of hurting others. It's about focusing on a group of students that have been largely underrepresented, and if you did probably the data, are struggling with the things that we're trying to get done, credit hours, completion of degrees, retention, and so forth. So that's that issue, I think. The other issue typically is what does it mean? So that's usually the issue tied with, I think, HSI status, when you're communicating that to the community. The other issue can be that somehow that you are diminishing quality of your academics because you're focusing on Hispanic students, which is a whole other issue, right? That goes around assumptions and stereotypes and things of that nature, which in some cases, obviously may be true, but we don't understand the systemic causes for that, right? We oversimplify why Latino students may struggle, right? And as opposed to looking at the systemic issues. And as a community college, how do we get involved in the systemic issues so that we can help lift students? So we do dual credit, you do a lot of dual credit courses, Are there ways that we target a student population or high school that will help us lift those students so that when they come here, they're ready to go? I would be, and I'll just be honest about this. The campuses that I've been at have been about, I said they've been about 40%, but there's some places that are about 25, 26. It almost makes sense to me there that the question of being an HSI is an issue because, again, 1 in 4 students. At campuses where you're 60%, that shouldn't be an issue really, because if you don't have those students, that means you don't have a campus. So what's the problem? I'm being somewhat sarcastic, facetious with that, but it's the truth though, right? Who do we serve then? If 60% of our students are Latino, and we're saying we have an issue with being an HSI, then who do we serve? So we only want to serve 40% of the student population of Dallas? So I think that's, again, I say that because I'm passionate about it, but when we start to develop strategies around conversations, that's not how we approach it, right? The approach is, okay, how do we educate, what's the issue, and how do we bring people along so that we can make sure that we're moving in the right directions? This is your student population, so how do we serve it?
Thank you.
But it is a sensitive issue, I'm not minimizing that, I know it's a big issue, but I think communication, we can do it.
Hi, I'm a student here, and as you may have noticed, we have a small library and a growing STEM department. What would be your, do you have any ideas upon expansion into resources as well as facility for a student body in these departments?
In terms of the STEM specifically?
STEM, as well as library, basic, facilities, resources, just ideas on expansion.
Yeah, well, again, I think I've answered this question, not that specific question, but some of these are hard to answer because you want to come in and get a lay of the land and figure it out, right?
Right.
But typically with libraries, there used to be, to those of you who have been in education for a long time, how many volumes you had in your library determined, how good your library was, right? Like, yeah, over 1 million volumes of books, in our library. And that's changed, right? Because now with the internet and access and journals, access to journals. So I want to find out, what do the programs that we're offering here, do they align with the types of journals that are offered through our library system? If I understood correctly, though, the access to the library comes through UNM. Don't we get access to UNM's library?
The resources. We do have libraries.
And I haven't seen it yet, but what's the temperature on this campus around library? Some schools have said we can do away with the library because most kids don't go to the library, students aren't going to the library anyway, right? Other campuses say, hey, we want to make our library more like a Starbucks or more like a Barnes & Noble. Students feel invited to go by there. So I want to find out those kind of things around the library. What are the journals? What do we have access to? Do they align with our degree programs that we offer here? If they don't, how do we make sure that they do? And sometimes it comes down to budget, moving monies around because you have to pay for those licenses to get access to some of those journals. But I want to figure out with the students, and maybe later on, I think, when I meet with students, I can kind of get a better feel for that. STEM is a hot issue. I was director of access at APLU. An initiative that I ran was actually a STEM initiative. We had money from a foundation to award 4-year and 2-year collaborations that were trying to increase the number of STEM graduates. And so the 4-year would say, like in this case, say UNM would reach out and say, okay, we work with Taos to increase the STEM pipeline from 2 to 4. But we were only giving those monies to the institutions who could prove that they already had been doing it for several years. And the reason that we did that was because evidence suggested if you can get a program or something in practice for 5 years, then the chances are that it gets taken on, that it becomes part of your budget expenditures. If it was a new program, we didn't want to fund it because chances were after we had money left, you weren't going to continue doing it. So I want to find out what the collaboration is in that regard. Is it focused mostly on 2-year STEM degrees, or is it a pathway to a 4-year degree? Where do we sit? And I'm sure there's a grant or money's associated with that. I know that part of that STEM or that help is nursing, maybe tied to some of that. You know, new building downtown that you focused on. So there's going to be challenges with that area too. Like producing good STEM, but where are you going to go work? Are there jobs in this area that align with that? If they don't, then would you like to start talking to you? What's your name?
Justin.
So Justin, you can get a good degree here. Chances are you can apply here. Maybe not. Are you willing? Are you aware that you might have to relocate to another city to take advantage of the education and that degree here? I'm just saying that loud. I don't answer it, but I mean those are the things I'm saying that you start working with our students.
Well, I mean, I'm aware I may have to relocate to another city, potentially another country, to do the work that I'm interested in. But I mean, I understand that a lot of people in New Mexico, especially in the legislature, want to keep people within New Mexico, and hopefully the jobs are provided by the time I have my master's and PhD.
Yeah, and you're sure you don't want brain drain, right? I mean, a lot of states say that, hey, well, you're educating our students, but then they leave and go somewhere else. And some cities are struggling with that. If there's work and employment here, that's where we want you to go. I mean, that's how we serve the community. But if there isn't, though, we don't want a student to have a degree and then be underemployed. I have some familiarity with that because I lived in Austin, Texas for a while, and nobody wants to leave Austin. So you've got PhDs and STEMs that are waiting tables just because they don't want to leave Austin. And those are people's personal choice, they have a right to do that. But what is our role as a college to make sure that we're educating students, not just on the degree program, but the jobs available and where they're available at? I think that's a holistic approach, and that you can make any decision you want to make as long as you're informed. And we need to make sure that you're informed about it. The other way I think that we should support STEM and expand is STEM in itself. There's math and science and other things that go along with these degree programs. What are we doing to make sure that our students are getting the help that they need in those areas? Right? So if it's chemistry and they're struggling, if it's math and they're struggling, what are we doing as a community college through labs or through tutoring or academic support to make sure that you're getting the support that you need? So those are some of the things that I would think about.
I'm Kathleen Kenoth, and I'm the library director, and I didn't pay him to ask that. He's just a dedicated student. But I have two questions, and they're kind of two sides of the coin. One is, have you been in the classroom? Have you been a faculty member?
I've had limited experience in the classroom in terms of traditional route going, having served 14, 10, 15 years in the classroom.
And then the other side of the coin is, a big part of this job is representing us at the legislature, and I just wondered, do you have relationships with your legislators where you're at now? Are you comfortable in that area?
So I'm going to go back. I want to hear your second question, but I'm going to go back to the first one.
Okay,
Now,
that's fine.
I'll answer both.
Okay.
So one of the things I think when you work with anybody is being straightforward. So that question about my classroom experience is, if you look at my CV, it doesn't make a scientist to use that, right? That's limited. Nonetheless, I think that there's an advantage to that. One is it didn't stop me from advancing into the position that I have now as a dean, where I work with 13 departments here closely. We're closely with the provost. And I think that the reason why is because just because I haven't been in the classroom as long as some of the faculty have, doesn't mean that I haven't taught. And it doesn't mean that, and I've been teaching all my life, right? Whether it's tobacco cessation classes for juvenile students, through that curriculum, through to curriculum development, through professional development skills like UTSA, through even the research and grad work that we did doing a PhD, working and teaching all kind of follow the same philosophy. How are we engaging students and how do we make students feel comfortable in the classroom? The other benefit I think that I have because of that is because it makes me not an expert in a lot of the areas, right? So sometimes I think what happens is if I'm a provost and I have, let's say I've got in higher ed and policy, and I've been teaching for X number of years. Well, I know how to do it better than everybody else because I have great course evaluations. So obviously, if I come in, I want faculty to teach the way I've been teaching. It's better. I don't have that approach. Mine is the opposite. I'm going, okay, what works in your area? Because most of the times what we're going to talk about when I work with faculty and chairs, if it's if it's issues in the classroom, what are the issues pertaining to? Students aren't learning well enough, they don't have the outside resources that they need. It may be pedagogy, and in that regard, you work closely with the faculty senate or the faculty professor development committee to figure out, hey, do we need to do some workshops around engagement? You know, how do our faculty work with the type of students that we have? They may not be familiar. It's a big issue where I'm at right now. Most of the faculty that we have at the place where I'm at attend the small private liberal arts colleges. And I have to remind them, you're not at your small private liberal arts college where you went. You're at a community, at a four-year college in the Bronx. Many of our students are barely getting into college. So you can't teach like you're at Smith or like you're at Pennsylvania. You know, you have to come down and really engage with the students. So it's never stopped me, and in fact, I think it makes me actually a better administrator, which is what I think we're looking for here at Taos, right? Which leads to the second question. I'm not required to have relationships with the policy people right now because I'm a small private Catholic, and you know, it's just not something that we do in this job. However, when I was director of community outreach at UTSA, one of my jobs that I had was working in the South Texas area, which is a lot like the northern area of New Mexico in terms of being rural. My job is to work with city council and representatives to get our president down there to speak to the chambers of commerce and speak to city council about why they should be supportive of the University of Texas San Antonio so that we can build this pipeline of students from their high schools. So I had experience working with policy initiatives when I was with HAKU. Obviously, we met with representatives at the national level to work on issues related to HSIs. At APLU, I had a little bit of that, not a lot, but had some foray because you're in DC and it's almost hard to avoid. But those are the things I like doing, quite honestly. I mean, that's kind of why I'm excited about this position. I think you can tell me, I keep looking at you, but you may actually love doing it, right? I want faculty to say, that guy supports the heck out of what we're doing in my classroom, and I know he does. And he also likes to want to talk to the community and to the legislators, which I don't even want to do. But I trust that he would do it for me, and he would do it well. And I say, damn right.
It's pretty important at this stage of the game.
I know.
There's a lot going on in Santa Fe that's trickling down to us, and someone has to keep their finger on the pulse.
Well, from my understanding, not only Santa Fe, but even, I guess, making sure that we're communicating well with UNM. You know, some of the goals and objectives that we have there.
Dr. Valdez, I have another question. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing community college students? And if you could, I don't know if you're familiar with, Taos and our surrounding areas, if you wanted to speak to our unique situation.
Well, I mean, I think that the challenge, that kind of what Justin said a while ago, I'm going to go get a degree, and I hope that there's employment here. So I think that that's one challenge, that in terms of just the degree that they're seeking in employment. Beyond that, I think that the challenges that they face are no different than the challenges that my students face at my four-year institution. Mostly first generation, mostly Pell eligible, so money's an issue. Have to work to get through college. Sometimes maybe started college, went back to work, and coming back to college, as an adult. So all of those are challenges, barriers, and obstacles that our students are facing. But I think in particular, community college students is, if I go get a certificate program, do I have to come back in 18 months and get another one? And that's just how industry may or may not change. If I'm getting an associate's degree, am I getting it because I want that degree to make more money here in Taos, or I'm willing to move to Española or some other town that's nearby that has a job opportunity? Or do I want to get this degree to go to UNM and transfer, or to Adams State, or to Texas Tech, or to ASU even? And I think that that's one of those areas where I would really be interested in. I think that that those roads are not mutually exclusive. There's no either or, right? It's and. We should do everything we can to make sure that kids that come here that want to transfer can transfer. We should do everything we can to make sure that kids that don't want a four-year degree, want a 2-year or certificate, or have that opportunity as well. But the challenges, from what I understand, are very real here. You have a small populace, and there really is no industry, right? It's like, I guess now there's healthcare in the area, but you only get one hospital. You can encourage people to get more injuries than and then you have, I guess now you're starting to tap into hospitality. They said that might be, which is probably not a bad idea. I think that this could be, this with nursing, a destination spot. I think that you're going to be, nursing to me, I said this earlier, like law school.
And you'll go to law school wherever you have to go if you get in, because you know you don't have to be there forever, right? So let's say somebody from Albuquerque that says, I'll go to Taos for a nursing degree. I don't want to stay there, but I'll go and get my degree there. And I think that could be the case for several programs. So, but that's it doesn't really answer the question of the challenges, but I think the challenges are not that difficult. And sometimes I've been doing this for so long that I think it's like, oh, well, the challenges are simple. Money, family, location. Like, that's what I've been dealing with all my life and all my careers.
Thank you.
Dr. Valdez, with state funding for higher education continually decreasing and there being an increase in required performance funding, what are your thoughts or what is your approach to ensuring we remain a viable solution for our community for providing those college opportunities?
So the formula of funding, are you talking about in terms of monies that the state is willing to invest into the college, right? So you got a couple different funding streams, from what I understand. So the state legislature, as you guys know, not only here, but in New York and Texas, wherever, right, they kind of set this metric, whether we like it or not. Like, we can advocate all we want for it, but if we don't get it, at the end of the day, if they say, hey, we want to know how many kids you're graduating, we want to know what you do with that money, this is a performance-based, we got to know that. And so part of the job, I think, of the CEO is bringing in everybody and saying, look, this may not be where we think we should be going, but this is where the legislature's headed. So this is what they're expecting. So how do we adjust to make sure that when they come to answer those kind of questions, it gets back to our grants? You know, think of it like a really huge grant, right? There's certain objectives that we have to meet. So let's make sure that we're doing everything we can to meet those objectives, so that when we're advocating that we can say, this is what you're asking of us, and we're doing it very well. We should continue getting the funding that we're getting. You are, from what I understand, very well supported by your state representatives. I guess that you have here, one of your senators, Cisneros, is like one of on the finance committee, I believe. He's got a lot of power, so that's good. So how does UNM-Taos market itself to the community? And apparently, I met with an advisory board member last night. You guys have a good relationship with the community in terms of the advisory board. So all those things are good. But outside of that, what are we doing? So you know that the return on investment, if you get a certificate here, is what, $7,000 more for the rest of your life. It was one of the statistics I read. That there's a value addedness to getting a degree here that helps the region. It helps Taos, it helps the state. But do we communicate that effectively to the community? I mean, are we using that data to talk to students and families and say, look, it's not just about like, yeah, UNM-Taos is there, so I'll start there. But they're like, no, this is a really good education, and this is a really good return on your money, and all these other things that are associated with it, right? So if you get a kid that says, well, I kind of wanted to go to UNM, and I got in, but I don't know if I'm going to go to Albuquerque, but I guess I'm going to go. And then they're there for a semester and they do bad. Or they're there for a year and they don't do as well as they like. So guess what? The next year they end up back here. Now UNM's lost them as an FTE because they've transferred here rather than come back. Well, if we would have communicated maybe a little bit different to that student, maybe that kid would have said, you know what, I don't really want to go to Albuquerque the first year, and I'm going to go to Taos. I'm going to go to UNM-Taos, and I'm going to do well here for a semester or two and do better. So all that's tied to the formula-based funding because it's about support from the community so that when we're advocating, but all of it goes back to how do we know we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and that game plan sometimes is set by the legislature, and we just got to follow it. That's coming from the feds too, by the way. All this, where's the IPES, right? All the IPES, all the things that you're being asked to report on, and you're probably saying like, I never had to report on this. Or like you said, faculty come to you and say like, you know, I need to know the answer to these questions. Where before I didn't know.
Well, even in the grants department, you know, the Title III part of STEM application last year was they completely revamped it so there would be more evidence-based performance measures. I mean, it's affecting every level of the system.
The last place it may affect, or maybe the first place, depending on how you look at it, is actually the accreditation bodies. I was at a middle states accreditation because we're short an assessment person right now where I'm at, so I'm the person that's kind of overlooking institutional assessment. So I was down in Philadelphia, and even the way that they're looking at accreditation, you know, we had 14 standards, now they're dropping to 7. And all the data they're asking me to populate online is data related to retention and graduation rates. And we're going, whoa, wait a minute. Only 9% of our students come in, you know, as traditional FTEs. So how do you want us to measure the other 91% of our students that we're serving? So all of this is kind of happening at the policy legislative level. So it'll be my job to make sure that we're on it, working closely with our representatives, and then come back and convey that information to the campus. A couple more minutes. A couple more.
Couple more.
Speak now.
Or come back.
Speak now, come back
It's
at
okay,
5:30.
come back.
Gonna come back and I'll look that plastic. It ain't really there to coast.